Hey now, good morning, happy Tuesday. Sorry, I stumbled because, gosh, we're just doing so many classes, so much fun, so much interaction from you guys, and I really want your film scores today. I would love that. For Down Three Dark Streets. You know, fun film noir. Not the best movie, not the best title either, but I mean, like one of the best last scenes dangling from the Hollywood sign. I can't think of any other movies that actually use the Hollywood sign. There's that really cool thing in that Netflix show Hollywood where they're kind of dancing on it, but of course that's not dancing, but you know what I mean. But that's a set. This is the actual thing. A very steep hill too. So I hope that, you know, that'll be fun. So get that into me today. Okay, Classical Tuesday. We got to revisit somebody who's really important, because that's what we talk about. We talk about people that, you know, people talk, you know, hundreds of years people still talk about this. So I wonder who's going to be talked about a few hundred years from now. Who knows? Definitely Frank Stallone. So anyway, we did Bach quite a few months ago, because tomorrow we're going to talk about Baroque and pop music. We've mentioned a little bit of that, but I want to, and you would think, well, how does that even work? Because we talked about God Only Knows and Brian Wilson's influence from Bach. So instead of just replaying Bach, because we did just see it, we're going to play one of the greatest Baroque composers born the same year as Bach that we looked at last year and that you'll know of. So we're going to revisit the life and the work of George Frederick Handel. Handel was German-born Baroque composer, known for his operas and oratorios, and wrote tons of music. Oratorio is a large composition for orchestra and choir, but it's different than opera. Opera is kind of more musical theater, okay, because you have costumes and singing and an orchestra pit. Oratorio is more of a concert piece, so it's less expensive to put on, but We'll talk about his oratorios later. But one of the greatest of the Baroque period. Baroque is ornamentation, right? We have Baroque architecture, all the little ornamentations on buildings. In the music score, all the little ornamentations in the music score is the same. You know, Baroque is all those kind of notes. Who's the most famous Baroque composer that we've talked about? Yeah, you guessed it, Frank Stallone. No, not Frank Stallone. Bad SNL reference. The most famous Baroque composer that we've talked about is Bach, right? Father of music. Okay, Handel's born the same year as Bach. Interesting, right? We're going to see if they ever crossed paths. They didn't. They never met. They wanted to, even though they grew up 80 miles apart from each other. Handel became a British citizen. He traveled a lot, so we'll talk a little bit more about his life. But during Handel's lifetime, wrote 30 oratorios, 50 operas, very tall, robust man, outgoing, loved good food, wine, and entertainment, and was a little bit more extroverted than Bach. Bach married and had all those kids. Handel didn't marry at all, didn't have any kids, but wrote probably the most famous thing we're going to look at later is the Messiah. Handel's Messiah. Everyone's heard of that piece. And we're going to listen to some of his other music. And then we're going to talk a little bit about why Bach and Handel are a little bit different, even though they were born in the same era. I mean, aren't we having too much fun already? I know I am. Okay, so let's leave the 105 freeway. I never thought I'd say this, the 105 freeway, and let's go over to Germany. This is, Bach is born in Halle, Germany. In 1685 he's born, so like I said, the same year as Bach. So we're gonna need a timeline ASAP, because I'm serious, I'm not joking around. We need to see this. Same year, Handel lives a little bit longer than Bach, but they're born in the same year. Now we looked at Vivaldi. Vivaldi's before with the Four Seasons. He's before these guys. Still part of the Baroque, though, for sure. And then Henry Purcell, who we looked at, even before Vivaldi. Remember Monteverdi? The guy that wrote kind of the first opera? He's way before. That's Renaissance going into the Baroque. With Bach and Handel, we're in the Baroque. No questions asked. And this is before the classical period, which, who comes along? Mozart and Beethoven, right? We're simplifying this. That's the classical period. And then, you know, as we know, 19th century is romantic, right? We get Wagner, and we get all these other people. And then 20th century, we get Britain and modernism and all that stuff. So, okay, so we're going to stay in the Baroque period. Baroque is I think, very fun music because it's very upbeat. And there's chords and there's melodies, and we're going to see that it's just very much like the same kind of pop music written today. So Handel's father did not want him to go into music. He wanted him to go into law. He was a barber and a surgeon. I don't think you can do that. Can you be a barber and a surgeon? I guess you can, but I don't know if those two are completely related. I wouldn't want somebody doing surgery on me that has to give a haircut later on in the day, but yeah, that's just me. But he longed to study music, even though his dad didn't let him. So his mother allowed him to secretly study music, and in fact was able to get a little clavichord, because this is before pianos were invented, right? A little clavichord keyboard smuggled into this tiny room in the attic. And at night, while the family was sleeping, Handel would practice on this clavichord, and this is where he learned to fall in love with music during the nighttime. But he mastered writing for the organ and oboe and violin. He became a violinist. By the time he was 10 years old, he's learning all of these instruments, and by the time he's 11 to the time he's about 16, 17, he's composing a lot for the church and cantatas and chamber music already. So he learns music, though, composition and keyboard performance and all that stuff. In Hamburg, Germany, he joined the violin section. So he's a violinist, and he's playing in the orchestra. And he's also becoming the harpsichordist. Early in 1705, he's becoming, doing that. So when he goes to Italy, his music style is developing, and his fame is developing too. He was much more famous than Bach was, probably because he traveled a lot and he toured his music a lot. By 1726, he becomes a citizen. So that's why he's a German-born composer, but sometimes the English consider him their own composer, because that's kind of where he spent most of his career doing that. And he starts writing oratorios. So like I said, it's different than opera. It's kind of like a concert piece opera without the costumes and all that and all that stuff. He had a lot of health problems, and particularly with his eye, because if you remember, Bach died of a bad eye operation. That's what got him. He lives a little bit longer than Bach, but he loses sight. He has problems. Cataracts. He has problems with his left hand. He surpasses all of these illnesses though, and he keeps writing, even though by the end he's completely blind. He dies though a very wealthy man in 1759 at age 74, so lives pretty long life. Never had kids, never married, very charitable, very good guy, it sounds like. Gave a lot of his money and his assets after he left to his servants, a lot of charities, including the hospital, a big hospital. So he was very philanthropic. And in fact, Jimi Hendrix moved in next door about 230 years later to where Handel lived most of his life and died. So Hendrix is next door to him. So the biggest piece is the Messiah. That's the elephant in the room. Let's just get, the Messiah. Okay, most famous work. Maybe you've heard this piece. Hallelujah, 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 He writes this at a pretty bleak time. He owed a lot of people money, and he suffered a stroke and was complaining of all this blurred vision and had his health was failing, even though he wasn't quite dying yet. But he was so inspired for this work, he wrote it in 3 to 4 weeks. People say maybe 24 days he wrote this whole thing. Between August and September in 1741, he writes this. Day and night. I mean, it really became his most beloved work. So he sequesters himself in London and begins to write this music using biblical texts, with the life of Jesus, but also the death and the resurrection. It's more of an Easter piece, but it's performed at Christmas time. But it made its first premiere in Dublin in 1742. So the structure it's an oratorio, but the structure kind of is like an opera. Not in dramatic form, but there's impersonations of characters, and direct speech. By the 19th century, the United States kind of said, this is going to be something that we're going to perform in December. It's weird how just kind of hundreds of years after a composer dies, either other composers or people get together and say, this is going to be our, this is going to, it's just like Tchaikovsky's Nutcracker, was a huge failure until a few years after, and people were like, okay, well, this is going to be just a Christmas piece now, and we're going to perform it every year, and that becomes tradition. So there are roughly 250,000 notes in the Messiah, which somebody did a test on, saying that that means that if there's that many notes written in the Messiah, that he probably did 10-hour work days. So if Bach and Handel are in the same time, growing up at the same time, some of their music is, if we play a lot of their music, some of it is hard to tell the difference between who's who, but for the most part, Bach is, remember we did a whole class on counterpoint, several independent lines going on at the same time, fugues and canons. That's polyphony. Polyphonic music, where there's multiple melody lines at the same time. Now Handel did this too, but Bach is he's more the master of polyphony. So polyphony. So what's Handel doing more? He's doing more homophony, homophonic music. Homo meaning the same, right? And that's music where there's a primary part, where there's like a melody with supported by chords on the left hand, kind of more like what Henry Purcell was doing. Remember Henry Purcell and some of these Baroque composers were doing bass lines, chords on the left hand, melody on the right. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, that's what we do today in pop music. Mostly all of pop music is homophonic music. So if there's jazz, film music, rock, classical music, that's kind of how I write. It's a texture where all the parts of the melodies and the harmonies also have a lot of the exact rhythm, meaning that they're all moving together. There's not all these different other lines moving on. You can have obviously there's counterpoint going on, but Handel's more of a melodic, I don't want to say melodic composer than Bach, but he's using more homophonic textures in the sense of having a song. Like, listen to this song. This is from The Messiah, and tell me it doesn't sound like perhaps a modern day pop song. He has the chord progressions going on. He's got the movement going on, and then when the voices come in, they're singing a song, really, right? I mean, they're not. This is very song-like. We looked what Monteverdi was writing songs too, and the Baroque area is, especially very exciting because who doesn't like songs? Who doesn't like chord progressions and a melody? So he's doing that a little bit more than Bach is doing, because if you remember, Bach kind of is doing fugue contrapuntal music. So just a little flavor of Handel in the morning. So I hope you enjoyed that class that we did about a year ago. Hope you paid attention to his life. We all love the Hallelujah chorus. Interesting, that wasn't a Christmas piece. It was more of an Easter thing, but now it's done every year, Christmas time. And I mean, can you believe he wrote that in that short amount of time with all those notes? But beautiful melodic composer and a cool guy, it seemed like. Different than Bach, even though they were from this, they didn't meet each other. Bach had tons of kids. Handel didn't have any, just different lifestyle. So I hope you paid attention a little bit at the end of that class when I talked about homophony and polyphony and kind of the difference between Bach, because it is hard to tell if something's on the radio, whether that was Bach or Handel. It's not like Philip Glass, where if that's on the radio, pretty much know that's him. These guys were writing at the same time, obviously, and so it's a little bit harder to keep track, but we know that Bach had more polyphony in his music, more lines going on. Handel had a little bit more homophonic music, so not as many lines, more perhaps single melodic lines. Both of them had bass lines. We're going to talk a lot tomorrow about bass lines, because bass is like Bach. I mean, it's the essence of all music that we listen to. Even if you don't have a bass player, there's somebody playing that root or the inversion, which we'll talk about tomorrow. The bass and the drums are usually a foundation for all popular music. It has to be. But then, as we're seeing with this, even classical music, even they have that bass line, even if you don't have drums as accompany that, because they didn't have drum sets, of course, in the Baroque, but you do have that foundation that's very important, because we have a foundation today, even if it's like a Kanye beat. There's a foundation there with a bass and a drum or something like that, a drum kit, or whatever the kids use today. So hope you looked at Handel, because tomorrow we're really going to go dive deeper and look at a song, and probably have too much fun with it, unless we don't. But if we don't, let me know later. Okay, love you, and hope you enjoyed Handel. Tomorrow, Wednesday, we're going to get to our advance. So have a great rest of the day. See you tomorrow. Bye.